basically today we'll be talking through what DataHub is just really briefly with a quick demo, and then we'll be talking about how you can load data into DataHub. So to start, I just want to share, bounce over to a teacher account. So this is a demo teacher account, and I think it's important to start here to give people context for DataHub. So a lot of people know about Edcite Schools, which is a great tool to give common assessments as a district. You can distribute it across your school or district, and all kids are able to do the assessment in a viewer that's aligned to your state assessment. So we're all familiar with that from Edcite Schools, and that's a really useful tool. What we're seeing now is teams are interested in seeing more than just their assessment data from Edcite Schools, and so they're choosing to get the Edcite DataHub. And that's a place where you can store more sources of data than just Edcite assessment data. So let's take a look in this teacher account. This is just a demo teacher account, how that kind of integrates. So if you purchase Edcite DataHub, your teachers, your school admins, your district admins will get access to these dashboards. And these dashboards seamlessly integrate with their account. So once you have access to a template, see the DataHub tab appear. And so this teacher is an elementary school teacher, and they've gotten access to two dashboards. One's a dashboard just generally for their class and all the assessments they're doing. The other is if they're analyzing a single assessment, maybe a common assessment that they've given as a PLC, and they want to look at data together. So let's just take a quick look. And again, I will get to loading new data sources, but this is kind of the why behind it, right? So we're able to see this common formative data from Edcite assessments. This is a baseball championship task that's created by one of our partners, SVMI, the Silicon Valley Math Institute, which does a lot of really great work with districts out in California. So you're able to see the mastery that students have on that assessment. You can see by students, you can see by standard how they're doing, but the DataHub does a lot more than that. You're able to also bring in Fountas and Pinnell data or other literacy data for students. You can look at more context. This is that SVMI assignment where you can see the actual question and see how students were doing within a rubric. A lot of teams will bring in NWEA data to compare how they're growing across different benchmarks. And a very common data source that we see a lot is also state assessment data. So whether it's the math, ELA, or science test, teams will import that in. So I start there just to give some good context for why we're doing this and what the goal is with DataHub. We want to bring all these different sources together in one place. So I'll bounce back to my PowerPoint now. So DataHub works by bringing together all these different data sources and giving, just like that elementary teacher we were just looking at, a nice simple view where they're able to see a deeper context for the assessment data that we're already collecting in Edcite Schools. Now, as we're talking about loading data in, we looked at Edcite data there, right? We saw the data from that baseball task. And the good news with Edcite Schools data is the Edcite team is going to handle that. Every night, your data is going to sync from Edcite Schools to Edcite DataHub. So you don't have to do anything for that to happen. Those reports are going to populate as your teachers give assessments and as students complete them. So that's automatically handled. What we're talking about today is how you can load some of that other data in as a DataHub administrator. So as a DataHub administrator, you might be loading in, say, NWEA data. Typically, teams will give that 3 times a year. State test data might be once a year. So those would be what we call low frequency syncs. They don't happen often, but you can load them. Oftentimes an assessment vendor will give you a CSV that you can just load directly in. The other type of sync that we see a lot of, and I'm not going to talk as much about it today, is high frequency. So examples of this would be like attendance data. I would call the Edcite data high frequency because we're syncing it every night. So attendance data is higher frequency because if a student has been present for 9 days and then is absent on day number 10, that's 10% shift in their attendance rate. So it's important that we're getting that data on a higher frequency basis. Every day counts. Every day we're recording data. So if you do have high frequency data that you want to see in DataHub, we provide an SFTP option. I'm not going to go into that quite as much, but once you're a customer of ours, we'll send you all the required steps to send the data to the SFTP. And then once it's set up, it syncs either nightly, hourly, or weekly to the DataHub. So that's a really good piece of news if you're on the technical team for a district. You don't have to spend all your time daily uploading files. What we're going to look at today is for those lower frequency syncs. So that's a good piece to make sure we're clear on. You don't have to load all data this way. Good. So let's actually take a look at a quick example here. So I made a sample file with NWEA data. So what I'll do is I'll switch to, we were in a teacher account, which is showing, that simple view of their class dashboard. They're able to see all the data in one nice place. What I'm going to switch to now is show you an account that is a DataHub, what we call a DataHub admin. So you can have one or more DataHub admins set up for your district if you're a DataHub customer. And being a DataHub admin, you get to do a few things. So one is that you can load new sources in, and we'll go through that today. You can also customize the reports and dashboards that are going out to your teachers. So if someone says, hey, I want this to be orange instead of yellow, you can go in and make that change. And it'll show up, once you save it, it'll show up instantly for all the teachers. So you can go in and make these quick fixes to even improve the dashboards that you see. Finally, you can even change who gets access to what dashboard. So I'll switch to demoing now, and we'll look at the steps to actually load this. So I'm going to do a quick switch of accounts. So we've set up this account with DataHub admin access. So I'll take a second. If you're a DataHub admin, this is going to be your homepage, this admin reports hub. When you're on the admin reports hub page, you'll see a DataHub tab, which has two options below that: DataHub home, where we'll go in this demo, and teacher templates. Teacher templates is where you can actually choose who gets access to what, but we'll talk about that in a future webinar. One quick thing, if you sign into your account and you think you're the DataHub admin, but you don't see this page, or you come to this page and you don't see this tab, all you need to do is shoot us an email. You can use the feedback button and you can type in DataHub admin, need set up. Send us a message, we'll get your email, we'll get you set up with that access. So I just like to say that, in case you're watching this as a future recording and you're saying, hey, I don't see this here. Just let us know and we'll follow up and get set up with the proper access. So today we want to show how to add new data sources to the DataHub. So anytime we want to do that, we'll go to DataHub and DataHub home. And where we get brought to when we click on DataHub home is called the Explorer view. So this lets you explore, sorry about the noise in the background. This lets you explore what's in the account and what's set up here. No need to do anything from this view. So there's going to be a lot of files. We've loaded some Edcite data in that we sync nightly that I was mentioning before. You may have also loaded some data in this data tab that you already see here. But all we're trying to do is create a new table and add new data. So if I want to do that, I go to create new table / import data. Good. So once I do that, I'm going to get a list of options about how I can import the data. You may just want to type it in, but that's probably not a very efficient way to do this with a lot of data. Typically what I see is people will use files. So if we click on file, you get an option. I'm going to load some state test data for demo. And you can write a description for this table as well if it's helpful for you to remember what the context is. Maybe this is 2022 state test data collected end of year. That can be helpful for context. Now, we support a bunch of different file formats. So CSV is one of the more common ones I see. A lot of times if you export from a Google Sheet or something, you'll get it as a CSV. You can also do Excel files. These are probably the most common two that I see, but it does support some other file types as well. So it's pretty flexible in what you can import. So what I'm going to do is choose a file from my computer. So I've got the this data file here, and I can go through. What I can see here is I can see what each column is. I can see the first 5 rows of data from that column. And what I can do with that is I can check to see if the data type is the correct data type. So this is where I want to share a few just little tips and tricks here. When in doubt, I set the data type to be plain text. And just to give you an example of why that is, sometimes people will have a school ID that starts with a 0. So if your school ID is 035 and you make it a positive number, the computer is going to think 035 is the same thing as 35. Let's drop that 0 on the front. So you'll end up with a school ID that's just 35, which may not match your system, which may cause other issues. So I always say when in doubt, use it plain text. So I don't see any columns that are like that right now, but just as an example, this is how you can change it. Good. So you can also choose what to do if there's errors. So if the data format doesn't match, I normally just use it as set empty value for column. So we can do create, and then it gives us this nice summary. Now, if you're doing a bigger data set, it won't give you this summary yet. It'll take some time if there's, say, thousands of rows. But once it's imported, that is now a view that we can see in the workspace. One thing I'll warn you about, it does ask if you want to auto-generate reports. I almost always say no to this because it's trying to get a little too fancy for itself and it'll build a bunch of reports. The Edcite team will help you with building reports, so you don't need to do this. So it's good that this popped up, but I would say no. Good. So here's the table that we've imported. We have it now in our workspace, and we're able to build reports, etc., build dashboards off of that data, and it's now in the system. One step that I like to do is just make sure by going to the Explorer view, you can search for the table name and just make sure that it's in the right folder. So it looks like it's under tables and reports, but I have a folder for state test. So I'm just going to select it and move to the folder. Where's my state test? Data state test. I'll put it in there. So now if I go to the Explorer view, it's under that file and it's nice and organized. So that's how you load the data, then make sure it's in the right folder. A lot of times someone will be, I just want to bounce back here real quick. So a really good question that I actually got yesterday while I was working on a call with someone was, is it best to have multiple files or one file? The answer is either one we can support. It's really about what's the easiest for you to pull. So a lot of times it's easier to pull one giant file for the whole district. That's a little easier for us, so we slightly prefer that. But if you're limited to pulling, one file per assessment, and you have to do it that way, we can work with that too. We have query tables and other ways of stitching the data together. So it's really, I always say to prioritize, what is the easiest thing for you to pull? The file does need to have a unique student identifier. So whether that's your state student ID or their student number, it's very important that we're able to use that to map the data back to our roster data in Edcite. So if you are putting a source, that's really the only requirement. The other stuff, it can depend on how easy it is to pull for you. After you load your data sources, we typically say the best practice is to shoot us an email and just say, hey, I loaded the state test data, or hey, I loaded the NWEA data. And we have a team on our end that will just check, they'll check the columns like I was doing when I loaded that, just to make sure the format is matching what we're used to and what we want. And then the team will link it up to our existing data. And then we can start bringing it into more reports. So we were looking at, this state test chart, right? Once you load the data and it's available, we can build these reports. We can put them in a dashboard, and that view can be available to teachers. So loading the data is the first step in being able to get these reports and these dashboards in front of teachers that show data from multiple sources.
Hi, Brian. Thanks so much for walking us through that. I was wondering if we've got some time, if we could show how to add like a formula column and how to set up some of that conditional formatting, or if people want to generate their own tables, kind of where they do that, as in like an SQL to build a new table.
Sure. So a few things there. I'll start with a formula column. If I click Edit Design, I can add a custom formula or an aggregate formula here. And in this case, I'll add some scaled scores. So I can choose my columns. So I can take E scaled score plus math scaled score. And it's as easy as defining that. Now, once I exit out of this view, it's going to calculate that for my whole table.
Yeah, and I love that they give you all of those options, in terms of columns, but also actions. That way you don't have to know the command to write. You can find the action and then click on it to insert it.
Exactly. So this is a pretty simple formula of just adding two columns together. There we go. So we get the sum scaled scores here, which, sums those two scaled scores together. But to Julia's point, you can do a lot more functions than just plus. Plus is a very simple function, but you can do any SQL commands that you normally use, should be available there. But now I could use this and I could build a chart with this sum scaled scores value. So the other way that we're doing, interesting things with this is you can create and write a whole query table based off of a table. So I think this just wrote me a sample one, but I can execute that query and that's what it's going to show me. So I could, take from, and just like the other view, I have these tables and I have the the SQL functions. So let's say I wanted to grab stuff from the Fountas and Pinnell. Maybe I'm only interested in looking at who is the student, when was it collected, what was the text level, and what was their accuracy. Maybe we're focused on accuracy right now. So I can execute that command, and I'm going to just get a new table that represents accuracy for Fountas and Pinnell. And that's just a reading assessment we see some people using around the country. The query table will basically just put together, whatever columns you want. And again, you can use all of these SQL functions in order to do more advanced options. There we go. So you can see the preview just like when I was loading the data. You can see the first few rows and just their values. Once I save this, and I'll save it under intermediate tables. Now this is a table that I can build reports off of. So I could show by date what's the text level that students are reading on average. I could show accuracy by date. All these things are possible for stitching together data. And I think that actually, I'm glad you brought this up, Julia, because it actually connects back, right? If people have, if all you can pull is multiple files, so you have 10 separate files, we can work with you on writing a query table that unifies those and brings them all together. So we're pretty flexible with these tools on what data you're loading in. And the last thing we want, everyone wants to see all their data in one place, but the last thing we want is to create a huge time suck for your data collection and your data team, right? We want it to be as easy for them as possible. So as long as there's that unique student identifier in your files, we're going to be able to stitch it back with our roster data, and we're going to be able to import and handle the data using these tools. So even if you're not someone who's like, oh, I love writing SQL, that's okay. Our team can help you out with getting the data in the right format for you to use.
Awesome, thanks. The only other thing that I think is cool to highlight, and I haven't done it with the OneDrive file, but I know we've done it with a Google Sheet and that it does work with OneDrive as well, is when you're uploading data, if you just have a form, let's say that you sent out to parents or to staff members and you wanted to have their responses feeding into a table, from that data source, it's so cool that you could link in a Google Sheet as your file upload, and then having that update as people fill it in. I think it's just pretty amazing to think of all the different ways you can bring data into DataHub.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that. I think it's something we're really excited about. You can ignore the fact that it's my name and Hermione's picture there. But this is basically you're able to embed these forms, and you can see this is detecting that that's my email and that's my Gmail. So if I fill this out, that data is going to go back to where we're collecting the Google Forms response. And that could be goals that we're setting for these students. That could be, things that we're observing about them as we're planning for an IEP meeting. There's a lot that can be done there. And like you said, it works for both Microsoft and for Google stuff. So that's another exciting way, not just to look at the data, but also to make plans about what you want to do with it and how you want to, make plans to improve outcomes for students.